This is Speak Up. I am Sandra Shorty. Welcome back to this show. I am very delighted to have Andrew Lester back with us. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Hi, pleasure to be back.
Good.
Thank you.
Andrew has an MBA. He's a certified public accountant. He worked as a financial analyst in industry before spending 40 years on Wall Street. Therefore, I have certainty that he knows both industries operate. And we don't learn history of America. We don't learn political thought, how it created critical thinking.
Oh, it's really remarkable. I mean, it's not that America doesn't have its flaws, whatever. To me, it's the greatest country that ever existed. And we've learned and we've grown and we've moved on. I mean, to pretend that, that there was one group of people who were disadvantaged is complete and utter nonsense. It's not historically truthful.
Everyone who came over here was at some point disadvantaged. Not everybody, but the majority.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is the land of opportunity. And if the greatest, freest country in the world that's created value, created shelter for others, if we lose that stature, there is nothing to replace us. There's nothing else in the world to replicate what America does for people.
One thing that's interesting is how Congress got paid during the shutdowns, but others did not.
Funny how that works. They changed the healthcare system, but not for themselves. They get paid regardless of what goes on. Mandami is a socialist or whatever, but the first thing that he's going to do when he comes in office, they put through pay increases for all the members of government, of city government in New York. That's going to go through. Another person who, he lived in a rent-controlled apartment. He lives on a palatial estate in Mogadishu, where they had military protection when he went there for another party. I mean, it's okay to capture people's attention with an idea, but the money comes in from unvetted sources. We change systems. Everything doesn't change in a day. It changes gradually. We create rank voting, which lets inconsequential people garner votes along the way and disrupt the system. There was a traditional number one and number two. We then changed the system so there's 8 times matching. Where does this money come from? It comes from Islamic groups. Money supposedly came from Qatar, from other business people. Are these the people who should be funding US elections? Is this the way our process should work? He's charismatic, he's handsome, he has the right hot button issues in terms of affordability. You take New York with affordability. We have 50,000 vacant apartments right now.
And landlords hold their apartments off the market.
They hold them off.
And they get a tax deduction for it.
Well, they get the tax deduction as an ordinary business expense. The reason they hold them off the market is because as New York changed the laws in terms of the rental laws, and the system was abused by people, we had affordable housing. We were proud of it, but there's no longer means testing. Somebody who's now 90-something years old, in the last month of their life, some relative moves in and puts themselves on the lease, and they keep the apartment forever. I mean, these apartments become unaffordable. Landlords used to fix them up, recoup some of the costs or whatever, and then it made it profitable, and it was availability. They're changing all that now. The quote-unquote small landlords who owned a building or two, whatever, overwhelmingly have been going broke because they own the small apartments. They just can't keep up. So we don't even look at the effect of the laws and regulations. The lawyers in housing court won't evict somebody for not paying rent. You've had cases written up in the press where movie stars have refused to pay rent, saying that there was a cockroach and therefore the apartment wasn't kept up and they didn't want to pay. And they never pay back rent. You can't get somebody out in less than 2 years, even for paying nothing. So until we come to grips with making things reasonable, we needed a partnership. We had a business government type of partnership. It's one thing for businesses to take advantage and to over-earn. It's another for them to structurally lose money. If we're going to come in and landlords are going to structurally lose money, there's no problem resolution. 41%, I believe, of New York's income comes from the financial industry, Wall Street, banks, things like that. you kind of think people are captive, they're not going anywhere. Well, that's not exactly true. Miami's going to be opening up a stock exchange in the design district within the next 12 months. And Dallas is going to be opening up a mega stock exchange within the next 2 years. Both of them have substantially better personal income tax situations than New York State. Once those jobs leave, if they indeed leave.
And they will leave.
And I believe they'll leave. I mean, there's no replacing them. There's no hook to come in.
What they're putting in is casinos.
Correct. I mean, it's
hooking people on gambling.
It's the most unhealthy thing on the planet. You already are corrupting young minds with, the government takes over the lottery. The one deal that they've come up with, the one innovation was to raise the prices of the ticket from $1 in one case to $2, and from $1 to $5 in another case. Now you have all these online gaming businesses trying to get people to think that they could win big or make these complicated bets. There's a history of gambling. It's playing out here no different than it has in history. All of a sudden, professional athletes are getting caught by the FBI for shaving points, throwing games. College athletes. I mean, it becomes lucrative. Even if you don't lose, instead of winning by 10 points, you win by 8 points.
Historically, what happens at one point in a civilization, before as it declines, does gambling become the big business?
It's sort of, to me, it would be a latter stage event.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people, there should be more pride in real learning, in developing real professional academic skills. We all have human frailties. Sometimes people have problems with drinking or with drugs or with gambling. I mean, we shouldn't have government incentives to induce people.
To think it's normal behavior.
Correct. It's not normal, it's not healthy, it's not in anybody's best interest. And when you look around the country, I have yet to see a single state or city that's enhanced its standing by bringing in gambling. Only Las Vegas, which was a desert in the middle of the country, had gambling because it had nothing else going for it. Atlantic City sure didn't thrive.
Why does fraud in distribution to public welfare entities work so well after the money is distributed?
Well, first of all, it becomes a feeder system, no different than any type of drug or illicit activity. Once it starts, they think they can get more. They never want it to end. More people observe what's going on, and everybody wants to tap into the system. So, and for many people, it's hard to compete and be smarter than somebody. It's hard to compete and start up a business and work day and night, hoping that you'll be successful 10 or 20 years down the road. It's a lot easier to try to be a charlatan and to structurally take advantage of a system. And, for all the things that you see go on, or that I've seen go on in my career, it's really only a fraction of the people who commit wrongdoing who get caught. And more often than not, the punishment is not proportionate to what they've done.
And also they choose an example to get them to deflect the eyes away from the majority.
Absolutely. I mean, you see things now that are really pretty offensive and upsetting. I mean, you see people who've committed wrongdoing who have been convicted by a jury and sentenced by a judge, writing letters of either apology or a compliment to the president and getting pardoned. I mean, and some of them have committed terrible crimes. It should never happen. And yet, it happened under Biden. It happened under Clinton when Mark Rich, got pardoned. I mean, people have committed terrible crimes, but they've come up with, those that have been pardoned have come up with huge financial gifts or rewards. And for a regular person who reviews this, we don't have one system of justice. We have one system of justice for people with great wealth who have the means of doing different
connections.
Things. And the connections. It's just not right. And democracy is great, but it's sort of frail. People have to get up and believe that it's fair, that they're working towards a system and it works the same way for everybody. And if we deviate from that and people lose confidence in what we're about and how we're working, we're not going to be able to regain that.
What would you like the audience to take away with them?
I think people have to be much more involved. And I think people, in most of the world, you have people willing to lose their life to fight for freedoms and the right to vote. I mean, here people aren't involved. You have the minimus portions of the population voting, and then they're not happy with the outcome. I mean, I think on one hand, voting has to be incredibly simple. It has to be citizens voting and showing up. Absentee ballots and things like that are incredible flaws of process. I understand what they did during times of COVID, but that's over and we should get back to regular voting. And I think people have to, and politicians have to articulate real positions, and people have to understand that.
Yes, and it seems to me that once you put in place a temporary program, somehow or another it becomes permanent.
Point well taken. I mean, after 9/11, as tragic as it was a 9/11 commission, oversee the rebuilding of downtown Manhattan, make sure things are done right with buildings. 15, 20 years later, everything was redone. Can't get rid of the commission. Can't stop paying them. People keep their titles. I mean, once again, if you follow the money and see what's happening, people in these charitable organizations are dramatically overpaid. The people who head up these colleges and universities are overpaid. Elizabeth Warren taught one course at Harvard and got $400,000 a year. There are things that don't make sense that are going on. Columbia University, which is sponsoring all this bad activity, is one of the 3 largest landlords of New York. Should we continue to give them write-offs and tax abatements? They or NYU, as soon as they buy a building, it falls under the heading of the college and university, and it goes off the tax base. Everyone else in the state subsidizes what's going on. The trust and endowments there make a fortune and they don't pay any taxes. When NYU was shamed, all of a sudden they made the medical school free for everybody. So I don't understand why you can make a medical school free for everybody when they're crying about the cost of everything, and yet they have these trust and endowments earning a fortune, and yet they pay no taxes. So, I think we set things up with the best of intentions. I think the government and the other institutions have to step back and revisit some of this and say, we understand why it was great 50 years ago or 100 years ago, but as these institutions become self-perpetuating, we really have to revisit it. There's a difference between not being charitable and not being good people and having a process. So we get back to the term process.
Go ahead.
Things should be set up. When you're at a company, most companies have what would be called zero-based budgeting. Sometimes there's a change in the world, and the company said, we've done this, and we've grown this expense, we've grown this area for 20 years. But the world's changed, and it's no longer relevant, and it doesn't make sense. You look here, we have the MTA. You go on a subway, there's no ticket takers anymore. You drive in your car, there's no towboat people. And yet the cost of the labor on their expenditures goes up every year. How is that even possible? Well, they don't fire people. They just keep them forever. They abuse the system so that they get enormous amounts of money in retirement. And when you work in industry, I didn't get to work 20 years and retire and get the same amount of compensation. I got to work, 50 years before I could step back and say, okay, I'm okay now. So these things have to be revisited. Every once in a while, the newspapers would do a story on how the last 3 years of somebody's career, when they're union workers, they'd work every hour of overtime. Their money in retirement exceeded their peak earnings in their career. And yet nothing has done to permanently rectify it. When cameras were put in the Transit Authority to make sure that people punched their own tickets, the cameras were broken, even though we were in enclosed indoors and only the employees were let in there. So, we're not doing what we should be doing to make the system fairer. And, on one hand you go, well, this inflation, it costs are up. Part of the reason, and quite possibly a substantial amount of the costs being up, are inflated expenses that don't make sense and that aren't economically justified. And on the other hand, tax loopholes and corporate abuses that, if closed, would bring up a fair amount of money. And the government should also more intelligently, which they have not done, decide how should we spend our money. I mean, Mayor Bloomberg, who did a fabulous job, brought in a joint venture with Technion to make New York City a center of education. Mandami wants to eliminate that. You know, making things quote unquote affordable sounds nice. He wants to open supermarkets. Well, the first thing you read about, as how his brothers and cousins are buying up real estate, while AOC's family and supporters are buying up real estate to sell it to the city so that that could be the sites for these
supermarkets, and they will get the contracts.
Correct. And the only thing I can guarantee you, there's no possibility on God's earth that this will not cost New York hundreds of millions of dollars or more. Supermarket industry is incredibly competitive. The companies the public companies do a spectacular job working on thin margins to provide what they can. And in underserved communities, you have bodegas that do a great job as well. There's no room for these people to come in, for the city to come in.
If their expenses are underwritten.
Correct.
So therefore, they could charge anything or
Correct.
nothing.
They can temporarily, but they always got a free handout. Democratic presidents took care of them to make up the differences or be hidden. I mean, even Governor Cuomo. I mean, you couldn't even make this up in a children's story. He rebuilds the Tappan Zee Bridge. He doesn't disclose where the money's coming from. He doesn't disclose the cost of it. He builds it and then names it after his father. These things don't make sense. So you don't really know the cost. We have congestion pricing. Mandami wants to give free bus rides to everybody, while people who drive into the city should pay $9 just for the privilege of coming in, while you're giving away the rest of it. The money has to come from somewhere. There are no free lunches. So, you know, again, from a process perspective, you'd want to think about what's the thought process? What am I looking to accomplish here? What's being done? And if you don't go about it intelligently, and if you don't think from a process perspective, it's just not going to end well.
Then we have now interest rates are starting to come down, of course, because it benefits real estate development and people who are building hotels.
Well, the interest rates were sort of manipulated by global central banks to try to create demand, incentivize things, to bail themselves out from incredible financial distress. And what it does is really inflates prices. The markets get it. It drove up the values of real estate. It drove up the value of other things. What low interest rates do, it helps everybody hide from the financial obligations. I mean, Germany's toast, France is toast, but tragically, the US is getting to be toast. We now have like $39 trillion of aggregate debt. We need low interest rates in order to service the debt. We have locked in trillion or multi-trillion-dollar a year deficits. And the real question, and I've been wrong about this to be fair, because I never thought it would get to this level without sort of an economic calamity. So I've been wrong, but I've been wrong in terms of timing, but not direction. We have to service the debt. Trump could put in whoever he wants to put rates or whatever rate they want. The numbers are going up. At some point, there is no marginal buyer. You have the creators of stablecoin crypto buying the two of the largest 5 buyers globally of U.S. Treasuries. You know, I would argue that.
Repeat that?
Two of the question is who buys U.S. Treasuries. We used to talk about the Japanese are buying and the Chinese are buying, whatever. Two of the largest buyers now are companies that created crypto stable coins.
So that they're going to, shall we say, base the value on the cost of the treasuries or the interest on the treasuries?
Correct. What it really does is permit a recognized, mutually agreed upon measure of value with a return. So it gives confidence for actors all over the world to transact, knowing that they'll accept this as a currency because it's backed by U.S. Treasuries. It's not betting on a stock going up and down.
It's backed by treasuries, by the U.S. government.
Correct. And
like bailing out an industry, a company.
but you also create a circumstance where we don't really know who all the borrowers and lenders are. You know, why can't they just transact in treasuries? Why wouldn't they go to leading global banks? What is this accomplishing that the government might want to opine on if they knew all the facts of the transaction?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So that really can support all kinds of illegal acts, all kinds of entities which might even be criminal.
Correct. If
Really
you look,
criminal.
right, if
in the
you look
worst
at
sense.
it, I mean, unfortunately in the U.S. we can't be defeated militarily, but we should have a big sign on a country for sale. Anything could be bought. You know, the largest backers of our private equity firms are the Chinese sovereign wealth fund and the Arab countries. They get the technology they want. They have the partnerships that they want. They have the access that they want. I mean, you know, so it avoids the public scrutiny that otherwise should be present. I mean, the Chinese haven't stopped hacking us and stealing data or stealing intellectual property from our companies. I really think we need to operate with more of a sense of national purpose the way we used to.
That's right. The Chinese invest in all the major companies and the hedge funds, anything.
Absolutely. I mean, I actually think it's more difficult for certain hedge funds to do some of this in today's know your customer rules and what have you than it is for the financial institutions.
But who's looking over their shoulder?
Well, you have the SEC, so it depends. At the moment, I think things are incredibly lenient, and
But they'll pick on one hedge fund, and not the 100,000 of others.
correct. It becomes targeted enforcement, looking to, you know, who's interfering with us, who's doing something we don't like. It becomes very, very selective. So institution and these hedge funds, many of them are focused on how do I make the most amount of money? I don't need to be a crusader. I don't need to embarrass the government. I don't need to try to short a security and undermine a company. They're pretty smart people who run them and incredibly
Brilliant
talented.
people.
Yes, and they focus in and say, I don't need this headache. I'll just focus in on growing my business and doing well. I think that, for generations, Americans have been leaders to the world in terms of our values, our systems, our sense of right and wrong. I think we have to sort of dust that off and get back to it once again. We were the policemen for the world, and for whatever he's done right or wrong, watching Trump assert U.S. military again really calmed everything down pretty quickly. They don't want to mess with him. Watching the abuse of drugs and what's happened across America is tragic. And I'm not a lawyer, and I have no opinion on sort of knocking out these boats as he's been doing. But, from all the photos I've seen, none of them look like fishing boats to me, and none of them look like tourist boats. And there's been an incredible curtailment of illegal drugs coming into the country, and that's saving American lives. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I think that we have to have more of a moral clarity and a compass so that we all agree. I think Democrats and Republicans literally have to work together on this. You can't have our policies and beliefs change with each administration. I think the Constitution did a lot of great things. I think we got to get back to being more adherent to what was going on. When the Democrats come in, despite the Constitution saying to the otherwise, they're determined to turn the District of Columbia into a state. Why? Because they think they can get 2 Senate votes and 1 or 2 congressmen to help manipulate or game a system. That's sort of not supposed to be what it's about. We all know what it's about. And until we have higher quality people, it's really not going to improve. And I really find that incredibly distressing. It's no longer the United States, it's more like a bunch of states. And each state has a very different composition and value system. And I don't think it's really healthy. I understand them being able to do different things and live life however they want, but we shouldn't be able to game a constitutional system based upon whatever's going on.
We really need to learn about what the Bill of Rights were about, why the Bill of Rights came into being.
Yes.
Maybe even read the Federalist Papers.
I agree. And I read something just this past week where like less than 20% of young people, as defined as like high school and college age people, will read a book. You can't get your news off TikTok. You can't get your news off Instagram. To be honest, I don't think you get your news off mainstream media, but there are a lot of podcasts, high quality ones, not the clowns like the Tucker Carlsons or the Candace Owens, but there's a lot of good information by smart people. There are a lot of things you could read about, on investing from, Howard Marks and Mario Gabelli and Lee Cooperman and, Warren Buffett. If you have nothing to do, you could reread the Berkshire annual letters where he used to, kind enough to share some really great thoughts on investing in business that people could learn from. I think we've gotten too far away from that, and I think it undermines the system. Andrew Ross Sorkin just wrote 1929. I always studied a fair amount of that, and I read his book. Really, for people who haven't read it or aren't into it, it's a great single source for everything. He had a lot of good work in it, discussing the structural failures we had as a country leading up to the ability to create financial failure that led to the Great Depression. And interestingly, had Bill Clinton and Alan Greenspan not changed certain things with the CFTC, they created the underpinnings for it to happen again in 08, 09. The system, the remedial things that were put in place to fix it actually worked.
Andrew, thank you so much for having come on our show. You were very educational. This is Speak Up. I am Sandra Schulte. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye.